This Athletic podcast is sponsored by Shopify. Now, when you think about companies like Skims or Allbirds, they are selling through the roof. Sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but often the overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, which makes buying and selling simple. And for millions of businesses, that business is Shopify, because nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet, and the not-so-secret secret with ShopPay, it boosts conversions by up to 50%. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell while your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web or in your store, in their feed and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more on Shopify. So upgrade your business to get the same checkouts used by Skims and Allbirds. Sign up right now for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/theathletic, all in lowercase and with no spaces. Upgrade your selling today at shopify.com/theathletic. That's shopify.com/theathletic.
As you've probably heard by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code THEATHLETIC, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code THEATHLETIC. Make your first deposit of at least $10. Place your first bet on any game and claim your voucher for a 1-year subscription to The Athletic. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code THEATHLETIC and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hello, the Race MotoGP podcast listeners. We're doing something a bit new this year. You may know that on the race.com website, we publish rider rankings at the end of every MotoGP weekend. I'm doing them this season, and we figured there's an opportunity here to do something a bit fun, multimedia-wise, to introduce a bit of reader interaction. So now after every weekend, the rankings get published, and then questions are submitted, and we tackle those questions. It sort of gives you a chance to go a bit more in depth on the weekend on some of the performances, to discuss riders that maybe aren't going to get full segments in the full podcast. As you can see in the latest episode, generally when I'm in charge, I just start doing segments on random riders, which maybe isn't the smartest way to go about business. But yeah, if this sounds like something that interests you, it's on the Race Members Club. You can subscribe to the MotoGP only tier and participate. It's something I find a lot of fun to do. Hopefully people do too. But yeah, as a sampler, here is the version of this new feature that we have recorded, and by we I mean me, after the Qatar Grand Prix. Hello, and welcome to the Qatar Grand Prix edition of the Rider Rankings discussion after our usual post-race feature. I'll keep this one a bit tighter, less talk about methodology. It's a word I don't like to use so much for this one anyway, because methodology is for like research papers and stuff, and this is much less of a scientific endeavor. In any case, if you're listening in, I don't suppose that you have the ranking order in your head right now, because that would be unusual if you did. So I'm just going to run through them very quickly. It's number 2, Somkiat Chantra. Number 21, Jack Miller. Number 20, Raul Fernandez. Number 19, Jorge Martin. Number 18, Brad Binder. Number 17, Enea Bastianini. Number 16, Joan Mir. Number 15, Augusto Fernandez. Number 14, Luca Marini. Number 13, Marco Bezzecchi. Number 12, Alex Marquez. Number 11, Pedro Acosta. Number 10, Ayagura. Number 9, Pecco Bagnaia. Number 8, Alex Rins. Number 7, Fabio Giannantonio. Number 6, Franco Morbidelli. Number 5, Fermin Aldeguer. Number 4, Johan Zarco. Number 3, Fabio Quartararo. Number 2, Maverick Vinales. Number 1, of course, Marc Marquez. Now, the only real contentious placement, it feels, this weekend is Alex Marquez in 12th, after, obviously, he effectively sabotaged Fabio Di Giannantonio's race with his retaliation move at turn 12 that was ill-conceived, ill-executed, ended up ruining Fabio Di Giannantonio's race, effectively ruining a very, very important weekend for the VR46 rider. Annie asks, I was about to write, I'm surprised that as anti-responsible writing you are, Alex Marquez isn't even lower down. Then I really realized I have no idea how much that dropped him in your rankings. So where would you have placed Alex and Digia if they hadn't crashed into Digia and Mir respectively, but still somehow found their way to the same positions? I think Annie might be more methodological about this than I am. I think she maybe potentially should have my job. But yes, in any case, it is absolutely a fair question. And also, Hayes mentions that, when Simon used to be in charge of those rankings, he used to penalize riders more harshly for anti-responsible riding, which maybe is a little counterintuitive given that on the podcast, I'm usually the harsher one, the one who's more irritated about moves, the one who's more in favor of stricter penalties. So let's talk about this one, starting with Digia, because I felt like I penalized Digia in my head for the move he pulled on Joan Mir, which was after the Alex Marquez collision during the Giannantonio recovery ride, a move that I rewatched ahead of this that seems just extremely similar to what Alex Marquez did to him, just also very inconceived in a corner where it was never really on, just barging another rider out of the way. It had less of an effect on Joan Mir's race because Joan Mir's race was ruined anyway. His weekend was gone through the gastroenteritis and all that unfortunate stuff. In theory, maybe keeping Di Giannantonio as high up as he is a bit of an act of charity. I think where I'm coming from with this is I tend to show a bit more lenience to that kind of riding, and maybe wrongly so, but Di Giannantonio was in sort of salvage mode. His weekend effectively was already ruined before that through no fault of his own. So he was sort of desperation mode, trying to salvage something. It was a bad move. It was an ill-advised move. Annoyingly, I think the way I've ended up ranking riders this weekend, I penalized him for it, and that didn't drop him a single position. So instead of being like very close to Franco Morbidelli up ahead of him, he was a lot closer to Alex Rins behind him. But I couldn't quite justify putting him behind Rins, I think, because otherwise, in terms of the general performance level, Di Giannantonio just well clear for me. But again, considering how annoyed Di Giannantonio was at what Alex Marquez did for him, the fact that the Mir move was felt very, very similar. I don't know. Maybe an opportunity for a bit of reflection there on his end. But let's get to the interesting one. Let's get to Alex Marquez. I also did get a comment on social media that I ranked him too low, which I understand because apart from that one move, the weekend was very, very good. It is a big move. It is a big mistake. Again, just very ill-judged, very ill-advised, and it's complicated to really figure out a way how you look at it, because in terms of the sporting outcome, generally these rankings are supposed to give you my view of how I feel the rider represented the team and the manufacturer. Did they get out of the weekend what the team and the manufacturer, the crew behind them, etc., should have expected them to get? Alex Marquez did generally, despite the Di Giannantonio collision. That compromised his race a little bit. It gave him the long lap. It meant he ended up fighting for positions slightly lower than he should have been. But when you take that in conjunction with qualifying, with the sprint, which is, a half race, but it is also still valuable, and he got a very good result there, he still, on the balance of things, had a good weekend. He got good points out of the weekend. He continues to outperform my expectations in terms of his performance relative to a lot of the other riders on the grid. And maybe that's a me problem at this point, because we've now had 4 tracks, and at each of the 4 tracks, Alex Marquez has been routinely just very competitive, very, very good. And, it helps when you have the best bike in the history of MotoGP underneath you, but he's been delivering a lot more, even relative to that, than maybe in the past. So it was a really bad move. He gets a slight benefit of the doubt, because effectively, under the penalty system that exists, and I'm not saying it's a good or bad penalty system, but just how it was, under that penalty system, he got away with it. So, for example, we're talking about the specifics of the ranking, right? So he's 12th, right behind him, Marco Bezzecchi, Luca Marini, 2 riders who have had a much tidier weekend. Could I have moved him behind them? Yeah, absolutely. But they are not outperforming my expectations the way he is. So he gets a lot of credit for that over the rest of the weekend. But yeah, I mean, I didn't like the move. So, I mean, the fact that some people were surprised by how high he was, and some people feel he was too low, I'm reasonably happy with that. Let's move on. A general couple of Raul Fernandez questions. Stuart Edwards writes, how long can Trackhouse keep him if he's just not feeling it on the bike? And Gordon wrote, is it fair to say that the Fernandez family is talented as physically, if psychologically fragile? Now, that is also a reference to Adrian Fernandez in Moto3. I don't know enough about Adrian Fernandez's career, I think, to be able to judge how well he executes weekends necessarily. I mean, this particular previous one was a bit of a mess on his end, but generally speaking, he's just been a different kind of rider to Raul. He's very, very steady progression from Moto3 sort of midfielder to more of a front runner, still not quite a consistent front runner. Anyway, let's talk about Raul. So generally, there's an impression in motorsport that contracts aren't worth, the paper that they're written in, the ink, the digital ink, whatever that is used to craft them. It's an accurate impression, but it's not 100% accurate. Like, the fact that you have a 2-year deal usually means that, depending of course on the wording of that deal, but usually means that either you see it out or you get something in return for not seeing it out, or there's got to be a really good reason to let you go. But Raul has had a tough enough start to 2025 to where I wonder whether, if he doesn't improve, there's going to be difficult conversations coming up over the second year of that deal. He's mentioned, the fact that he cannot psychologically execute a weekend, which, as an admission, is, it's quite a brave one, because riders, it's generally easier to talk about the bike or talk about specific moments of execution, etc. And when you're feeling that you were not delivering on your end in this part of the game that doesn't get discussed so much, I mean, I think it's quite bold to acknowledge that. I will counter that with saying that I also think it's kind of a convenient catch-all excuse. This past weekend, I don't know that Raul Fernandez didn't deliver at any specific point. It reinforced my impression from the season. He's not quick enough right now. He's not, and it's not a peaks and troughs thing, right? He's just, as a baseline, he is not where he should be. Now, part of that, he's talked about having to do work for Aprilia that is necessitated by the fact that he's the only rider with knowledge of the 24 bike and the 25 bike in the lineup, apart from tester Lorenzo Savadori. And I do suspect that is a very valid reason, but he's got a rookie teammate who, even in his worst weekend in MotoGP so far, still had him covered in every session. Even in the really bad Grand Prix, still, Iger finished ahead of Raul Fernandez. So, I think before we talk about Raul's execution of a weekend, we have to talk about where's the speed. Which is never the question you want to ask, especially in year 4, is it? When you start asking where's the speed, that's where it's really in a lot of trouble. Let's go to another rider that there were a couple of notes about. Last place in the rankings, Mr. Somkiat Chantra. Gordon asks, I was thinking, if Martin's 19th, who could possibly be 22nd? Then I remembered Chantra existed. Poor guy. Do we know why he's abysmally slow? And also I saw Tsundoku in the website comment section write, what about Chantra? He's a rookie, but he is miles off the pace. I guess they will give him the entire year. First, like regarding the contract situation and the year, I mean, it's a deal with Honda's participation. So with the participation of a major manufacturer, it is an Idemitsu backed bike. We have to imagine that, you know, Idemitsu was quite interested in having a rider there representing the Thailand market. He'll get the year. I'm super confident about that. He'll get the year. It's less of a consideration in MotoGP than so many other sports because you can't plug and play riders. Even if LCR really just badly needed something better from the bike right now, there's actually just not that many options that would be worth even exploring with all the catching up that person would have to do. I mean, if Chandra got the nod over, say, Ayagura, and Ayagura was still in Moto2, then maybe there'd be a conversation to be had. But no. It's he's getting the year. You'll remember we've had some really rough MotoGP seasons, and riders get the year. And with Chantra, it's still too early to think about that. He had a really good, really encouraging start through testing when he has got extensive mileage at a track. Like, for instance, you know, at the start of the season in Thailand, I thought he was quite impressively competitive. It's just the last two rounds, he suddenly, you know, he's found himself on an island. He's found himself cast adrift of the MotoGP pack, which I think was the sort of the fear, sort of worst case scenario. When his deal was announced, you would have thought, you know, given that his Moto2 record was fine but not exceptional, you wondered if he'll come in MotoGP and just run at the back. Marooned at the back. And that wasn't the case through testing. That wasn't the case in the opening round. It is the case now. It has been the case these last couple of weekends. Listening to him talk about it, he sounds like he feels like he's making progress away sort of from the limelight. He feels like he's doing, you know, enough, doing the right steps forward. There's not been massively high-profile mistakes, but again, the last couple of weekends, he has not been in position to make high-profile mistakes. He has not been in position. Like, you do not get a big bonus for finishing races when you're finishing them outside the points. In modern MotoGP, you know, when top 15 scores and you're not really in the conversation for that, even in some of the more attritional races. It's complicated. Again, still a lot of time. The proof of concept is there from earlier in the season that he can be quite competent and quite decent. But you gotta see more right now. And that's, you know, it doesn't have to be some sort of mean judgment or anything like that. Just, you know, gotta see more. It's a difficult championship. Gotta see more. Let's go back to Martin for a second, who I did rank 19th. Briefly thought whether to include him at all or not, but, you know, he did the sprint, he did the qualifying, he did the race. There's no reason not to include him. Hope he gets better as soon as possible. Really, genuinely, this is strange to say. I had a really difficult time going to sleep after Sunday's race, after I'd finished the rankings, because I just, you know, in the bed running through the list of injuries in my head and just finding it complicated to reconcile. And just, given the start of the season he's had, I hope he mentally protects himself from just, you know, the day-to-day irritation of it and all the getting so acquainted with you know, medical rooms and all that stuff. You know, motorcycle riders, they're generally more familiar with them than we are. But anyway, I hope he does okay. Jay Ferreira wrote, in my book, him being there and showing some flashes of pace and just finishing sessions was commendable. Martin's impossible to rank in a certain way this weekend, right? Because he showed up for an extensive test session, specifically mentioned at multiple points the fact that a big target was, you know, getting mileage, but also not getting hurt. But to get comfortable on the bike, to understand what you start to need from the bike, you have to push a bit. So you could be really harsh. For instance, you could say he had one target coming into this weekend, just not get hurt, don't crash, and and he crashed and he got hurt. I mean, he was unlucky in the crash, obviously, but he also maybe shouldn't have been out there on the track at that point. We don't know what kind of sort of fatigue state he was in, but the mistake looked pretty rough. It looked like a bad error towards the end of the race. Obviously, no size of error warrants getting hurt, but it looked like a crash that didn't really need to happen. So in a certain sense, he's had the worst weekend of anybody, because there's just one target. Stay fit, familiarize yourself with a bike that you don't necessarily know right now. And it didn't happen for him. But it's also it's hard to say, and I think there were genuinely flashes of pace. Like he's adjusted to it decently well initially. Let's see what he's like on the bike once he's back. Jay Ferreira also wrote, I wonder if it is fair to compare Fermín Aldeguer and superior equipment to Ai Ogura in the Rookie of the Year race. And it's a more general point, but I think it applies to this weekend specifically. I've mentioned earlier before that Ogura's had the worst weekend of his MotoGP career so far. He chewed up the front tire in the Sunday race, so went badly backwards, barely got into the points in the end. It was like the first time you've looked this season at any of his race starts and you're like, all right, well, you botched this one. This one did not go well. And he seemed well aware of that at the finish. But I think there's still an argument, and I didn't, but I think I could have, genuinely. There's still an argument for putting him ahead of Fermín Aldeguer this weekend. And let me explain why, because it's kind of a brave claim if you look at the results and the general outcome of Sunday in particular, because this was Aldeguer's best weekend of his MotoGP career, so I find it was a good weekend. But for instance, you look at qualifying, Ogura was what? Like almost half a second clear of the next best Aprilia, and Aldeguer was maybe 0.6 back from the best of the Ducatis. Having a Ducati just gives you the margin to do things, the margin to not have to be as on it over a single lap, the margin to have a bike that's clearly still superbly gentle on the tires. And Aldeguer is doing his part this weekend. I think he was demonstrably better on the tires than Franco Morbidelli, for instance. So I think that is quite impressive. In the sprint, you could make the case he was better on the tires than anybody. But he does enjoy this big Ducati cushion that Ogura doesn't. And imagine a situation where Fermín Aldeguer is half a second clear of the next best Ducati in that qualifying, right? I mean, he's the greatest rider in the world immediately. And so we should not lose track of the fact that that's what Ai Ogura accomplished in Q1. He dominated it by 0.4 with all the other Aprilias present. That's pretty insane. So still, I'm all the way in on Ogura so far. All the way in. The Sunday race didn't bother me at all. He looks so interesting as a prospect. I'm so excited to see what he can do in the upcoming rounds. I think he's doomed in the Rookie of the Year race, but whatever. Who cares? Finally, this one is unrelated to the rankings, so the MotoGP rankings part of this is effectively over, but it's still a fun one to talk about. Also, Jay wrote, I would like to hear your thoughts on the Moto3 race being one of the best races this season so far. If you haven't seen it, look it up where you can. I don't know, they probably do highlights packages on YouTube, so worth checking that one out. But it was a very good photo finish. Spoilers in 2 seconds. Angel Piquera is increasingly a rider you don't generally want to bet against in those final laps, even when you're not totally convinced he has the ultimate pace in a weekend. I enjoyed it. It's hard not to enjoy a photo finish like that. Qatar is a very good track for bike racing, clearly. Couple of reservations. The first one is it sucks that Jose Antonio Rueda's bike went pop. I think this season what we deserve is a mano-a-mano fight between the two most interesting and best guys in this field, non-rookie category, because the rookies are a slightly different topic, but Jose Antonio Rueda versus Angel Piqueras is what we deserve this season, and I don't want engine failures and that kind of stuff to to interfere in it. I mean, they both deserve better than that. Secondly, Moto3, it's too good and the racing is too interesting. In an ideal world, you would have the Moto3 racing be worse and the MotoGP racing be better. Because the way Moto3 is right now, the way it is positioned right now, it's still a very prestigious championship to win, but primarily what we're all trying to do, what we all want to do is we want to see which of these guys has the chops to make it to the top level. And when you have 4 riders finish within 1/10 in a slipstream madness finale, that tells you something about the individual outcome of a race, but that only tells you so much about really anything else. And then some of them come into Moto2 and they struggle there, and you start to wonder, did they just, was SPAC racing covering up their pace weaknesses, etc., or is there something fundamental that doesn't agree with them in Moto2 that still might get extracted in MotoGP? Just for me, it blurs the picture a little much, and I think the racing could still be good even if it was a little bit more spread out. I used to really, really enjoy those Moto3 races, but in a way it's slightly empty calories, both in terms of what you learn, and also if it's nearly every weekend you get a massive slipstream finish. Does it devalue the wins? No, not really, but it's maybe you get desensitized to the spectacle a little bit. So you'd like maybe a MotoGP race that's like that a few times a season, potentially. And maybe a Moto3 race too, but not more than a few times a season. Maybe not as much as we're having right now. Right. So that's the state of things from this weekend. Thank you for asking. Thank you for participating. And I will talk with you next time.